Welcome to the Citizens Reporter. I'm the host and editor, Diana Longry. Thank you for tuning in. The Citizens Reporter is brought to you weekly. Now, to help me with this week's news report is one of our regular citizen reporters, Mr. Mark Bradley. Thank you, Mr. Bradley, for being here.
Thank you for having me. And I have the information that you might want to hear for coming season, as it were, because of in the newspaper, they're already warning, don't wait, use your gift cards as soon as possible. You know those cards you pick up for the holidays and Christmas and birthdays and all that? Well, there seems to be a lot of problems with a lot of different businesses at this point, with, I think, in effect, a lot of brick and mortar companies are finding they have to actually phase out. They're kind of recommending, because this has been a rough year for a lot of businesses, please try to use your cards early.
Right, because perhaps the store will be gone by the time you get around to using your gift card.
And use it as soon after you receive it as possible. Okay, the one thing, and this one actually I put in, and it's already been decided they're not going to do it, but I think it kind of bothers me that anybody would even consider it, and that one happens to be that there was a proposal to ship Minnesota water to the Southwest.
Now, the article that Mr. Bradley is bringing to our attention is in the Pioneer Press of November 1st, and it's on the front page below the line, and it says railroad company wants to haul water to arid Southwest, and this proposal included drilling 2 Dakota County wells. Now, Mr. Bradley, you indicated that they've already thrown this plan out,
right,
with the baby with the bathwater, right?
Right, exactly.
But it's something to be aware of, because just because the plan has been thrown out now, it could come to light and back to life again some later time. But just to give you the details of what was proposed, and it would be a first for Minnesota, and they the state received a request from a small Lakeville railroad company asking what it would take for them to drill 2 wells in Dakota County and pull up out of the ground about 500 million gallons of groundwater a year. And then this water would then be shipped via rail to communities near the Colorado River in the arid Southwest. And it says here that the assessment, an assessment is required before someone drills a well that would withdraw more than 1 million gallons of water a year, and it's meant to provide to a potential water use permit applicant to help inform their decisions before they purchase equipment and drill a well. So there you go. Well, anyway, it's not going to happen right now, but
right,
keep your ears open in case if they renew their request.
And as we are well aware, anybody who's lived in Minnesota, White Bear Lake has had a problem with people drawing too much water out of it over the years, and during good years they get their lake coming up.
And not just people,
businesses,
municipalities,
right,
cities pulling their water out of that water source. That's
right,
correct.
So it makes it a hardship when you have that much water being drawn out. So it has to be taken with real skepticism, anything like that. Mm-hmm. Then I wanted to point out one other thing that happened to be something I caught in the newspaper, and I've been hearing so much palaver about what's right and what's wrong. I wanted to point out that Bernie Sanders had come into the Twin Cities about a week and a half ago, and he held his own rally. But the difference was, unlike a certain president, he actually priced the area that he would be using, and even when it got to be a different location, he was able to negotiate for the facility that was actually where he was having his rally. And he paid for that. He paid for the security, paid for everything on it. And I find it ironic that here is our president, and the Republican Party that has millions more dollars cannot pony up in any of the states for it's like a free political deal when the president comes in and has these rallies. And if he's going to have them, he should be able to put up the money himself. Why is it that the public is now funding a politician, and that's my feeling on it.
Right, and Mr. Bradley, certainly that goes to any party,
Right.
because there's been other presidents besides President Trump that have come into various venues, left a bill
Right.
with the city and the municipality to pay, and that they did not have their campaign or their organization pay for all of the services that were rendered. So
Right.
I think it's well said that certainly somebody comes into town, that they have a big rally, that they should include those costs as part of their party price.
Right.
Just as you would if you were putting on a wedding, you go to a venue, you have to pay and foot the bill for whatever is required to hold your wedding at that location.
Right.
So why should it be any different for a political rally?
And this isn't the first time that's happened, because we did have a Republican and a Democratic convention up here in Minnesota. And in both cases, there was contention on all the costs. But basically, in every case, both parties did pick up the costs to an extent. I don't know if it's total, so I won't make that statement. But that's something that should be looked at on this. I thought it was something that I found ironic that we had a president that said, well, I don't think I should pay for a cost that has been determined in advance that's for this facility. If you don't like it, leave it. Go someplace else. But that's something I think is part of our democratic society and what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to make a decision. Now, I also had an article here that I wanted to point out, because we've been talking about oil shipping, and I made the point that I am not very much in support of what's happening with the rails and pipelines and all that stuff, because I think it's really very deceptive in itself. But on the point of issue right now is the fact that in North Dakota, we have our second oil spill of the Keystone Pipeline in North Dakota. I don't know if it's the new line or it's the old line, but does it really matter? It means that they aren't doing the proper maintenance on it. They should be. And it is something that maybe our government should be taking an extra interest in, and maybe should have an oversight in it that is a lot more positive than it is. It seems like everybody's walking away like, okay, as long as something is happening and we are not responsible for it, we don't have to take and be part of it. Mm-hmm. And they're walking away from what is their responsibility.
Right.
And I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
What you're talking about, of course, is governmental regulation
Right.
with regard to protecting the environment. Now, this particular article Mr. Bradley's bringing our attention to is in the Star Tribune business section of November 1st. And again, it's on the front page. It's below the line. North Dakota oil spill is second for Keystone in 2 years. And it says that the Keystone Pipeline, which transports oil from Alberta to the Midwest, appears to have ruptured on Tuesday and has since spilled an estimated 383,000 gallons. 383,000 gallons, wow, of crude oil near the town of Edinburgh, according to the North Dakota Department of Environmental Quality. And it goes on to say that in November 2017, the Keystone Pipeline ruptured near Amherst, South Dakota, spilling 407,000 gallons of oil, though initially the estimates pegged the leak at 210,000 gallons. So basically, the leak was actually double what they really thought it was. So it kind of goes to your point, Mr. Bradley. Who's watching the chicken coop here?
Right.
Who's watching those chickens? Who's, who's being foxy about this, huh?
Right.
Wow. And it does say that the probable cause of the spill was a fatigue crack from mechanical damage during the pipeline's construction. Now, of course, Mr. Bradley, in one of our programs quite a while ago, you had thought of the idea that maybe these pipelines should have an extra casing that they are going through when they are, crossing the countryside.
Right. and also that there should be a pressure monitor on it as well, so that when they do find a drop in pressure, they go out and try to determine why it is going down. But the thing is, we're pumping so much through, and if you think about the two of them, we had, what was it, 300,000 gallons and 400,000 gallons. If you talk about it, it's almost 1 million gallons. That's a pretty doggone big lake. And the fact is that, you know, because they control everything, it has no value until they sell it. They're not talking about the cost of that, because they have to suck it up, they have to then reprocess it, and they still have to ship it. So the fact is that when we're talking about this stuff, and when I'm talking about that pipeline I was talking about that was supposed to be government constructed from North Dakota, it would have taken a lot of these smaller, weaker, less monitored pipelines offline at that point. So I'm trying to make that a point.
Provided that it was under proper construction and maintenance and regulation.
Right.
That's correct.
But that would be one of the things I would expect at that point if we're doing it as a federal program.
Right.
And then, of course, I had, because I always try to do the national as much as I can before we get into the nitty gritty. But this kind of ties it together, because I had an article that we lost a Met Council chairwoman. And I found it ironic that here is Nora Slawick resigning. She just got into that position. And she was bragging how important it is and how she had to stay in there to get this thing done. And here's the one who drove that goal line. And what's the name of the other one now? The one that they want to call actually the green line in Minneapolis, the purple line, and the purple line's over here. And we'd rather have the green line. Yeah, I mean, it's so much confusion to try to get the public confused. And that's why I find it ironic that here Miss Confucius here has been doing this on a regular basis. I should say confusion, because she has been so confusing in her aspirations for a long time. She had a beautiful job with a great retirement, and she gave it up to basically shepherd this project through. And now that it's at the issue level where it is at the major issues, not the minor issues anymore, because this is millions and billions of dollars being spent on the project, she walks out.
Right, exactly.
Why?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think you're onto something, Mr. Bradley, in that she was put into Maplewood as the mayor to be the placeholder to shepherd this whole bus rapid transit through Maplewood without any hitches. And then basically as a reward for doing that, she was then appointed to be chair of the Metropolitan Council. However, we have followed her tenure as Maplewood mayor for 5 years, and we were able to see from our film footage her ability to carry on council meetings, to even manage the meeting, to know where they were in the agenda, to follow up on questions, to understand the implications of what was being presented to her. Oftentimes were called into question, and it did not appear that she had the same types of experience and qualifications that her resume, which claims she's a project manager, that one would expect a person who's a project manager to have.
Diane,
go ahead.
She is she said it herself, she's a people person. And I believe she is. She's the type of person who'll throw any type of people out of her city council meeting when she was there. Because I was thrown out a couple times by her.
That's right. Well, here in this news article, there's a quote which I think is very telling. But this is from the Star Tribune of November 2nd. And it is in the Minnesota section. And it says that Slawick's departure, long rumored. So see, the people in the know already knew long time ago she was going to leave. So here it is, 10 months into her tenure, and she's left. But those in the know already knew that she was going to be leaving. And it says that comes as the politically appointed council grapples with extending the region's mass transit system. particularly the ongoing construction of the Southwest Light Rail Line, a dearth of affordable housing, and long-range plans submitted by cities across the metro area. It says that under her tenure, the council continued to clash with opponents of the proposed light rail line in Eden Prairie. It has faced other criticism in recent years, particularly from suburban counties and Republican legislators for being out of touch with local concerns. Mary Potic, president of the Cedar Isles Dean Neighborhood Association and longtime opponent of the $2 billion Southwest Light Rail Transit project, said that while she had no problem with Slawik, her departure gives the governor, quote, the opportunity to change the culture at the council, at the Met Council, into one that is more communicative with the community, end quote. The new chairperson, Patok, said, should, quote, have an attitude of service towards the community, unquote. Now, it is as if this is a flashback to Maplewood when Nora Slawik was the mayor of Maplewood. If you want to talk about communicative with the community, it was under her tenure that they removed public comment as an agenda item off of the city council agenda, so that you could no longer go to a city council meeting, get up at the appointed time for public comment, and talk to your council. That was eliminated under Nora Slawik's tenure as mayor. Also, she eliminated public access television, which is indeed the greatest form of community communication within your neighborhood. And so you see the very principles of how she conducted herself and the culture she created in Maplewood is exactly what she brought to the Met Council. And of course, it didn't work out so well, and so now she has to resign. Now, as an aside, I had a conversation with an individual who lives in Maplewood who had been politically aligned with Nora Slawik and who had worked on various campaigns with Nora Slawik, and he saw her not too long ago at some meeting or whatever, and went up to her to shake her hand. She actually would not shake his hand because she told him that because she was in a nonpartisan position that she couldn't do anything that was political. And he found it very odd that that would also include not being able to shake his hand. So you see, I'm wondering if it is that she's resigning because of health issues, or is it something deeper? Was it that she was involved in politics when she shouldn't have been? Because she told him that she had signed a form indicating that she would not be involved in politics. Perhaps she broke her agreements.
Well, also there was the other two things that I can put when she was still part of our city council, that she had the commissions reducing the times or extending the periods between meetings.
Yes.
And also that at the same time she was looking at that she was trying to develop the city to basically kind of isolate the public in many different ways. And the most important one, if you think about it, is the commissions are supposed to be hearing the public, and if they're only meeting every third month, when can they listen to the public if they still have to do business? There is no time for anything but doing business at that time, so it basically ignores the public.
Right. Exactly. Well, thank you, Mr. Bradley, for bringing that to our attention.
And then I would like to point out, because of we in the Maplewood have received a award, and I find it ironic that the group that is handing out the award is the same group that is working for the betterment of downtown St. Paul. And my issue there is that downtown St. Paul, when you take a look at the newspaper, the business section, they're discussing about they do not have good business acumen there. In fact, they're losing their business. And I would like to ask for this award that was supposed to be aimed at bringing business to Maplewood, what businesses gave them the award?
Well, Mr. Bradley, I think you're talking about the award that the Maplewood City received from the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce
Right.
for their North End Maplewood study and recommendations about the future vision for land use in and around the Maplewood Mall area. And I think your point you're making tongue in cheek is that that's the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce, that typically you would think that they would be concerned about business issues, about business environment, about business concerns, about promoting what is best for business. And yet this plan that they gave Maplewood an award for has actually recommended that a great portion of the commercial and retail area up and around the Maplewood Mall area should be converted to high-density residential housing. And so your question, I believe, is what is a St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce doing by promoting high-density housing in Maplewood, which, well, why don't they pay attention to the business climate in St. Paul? Is that what you're posing?
Yes, in fact, I had another article I was going to point after that, which kind of gives a reason why they would give that award out. The mayor and residents of St. Paul are angered and sorrow over the actions that are happening in their city because of they have so much more housing going into St. Paul, which we were talking about here, that it's really causing a lot of conflicts with, how should I say, a unscrupulous and bad element that's coming into the city. There's a lot of murders and killing that's happening, and we have seen a growth of it in Maplewood as well. So the fact is that we are kind of an imitation of St. Paul that's I hate to see, because we still have a business area. We have reason for people to live out here. And I am not against doing subsidized housing for the poor, but in an area where it is already stressful. I don't see going for more, and that's what I'm hearing from the Maplewood and the St. Paul City pushing for, rather than in the area where you've got a lot of development, a lot of land, and a lot of area like Egan, which is looking for people to work in their area, but they don't want to build for them, of course, because they can sell it at market rate or better.
Right. Well, and I think your underlying concern that you have, Mr. Bradley, is that if your governmental entity is putting all their efforts and their planning and their resources into just saying, well, we're just going to turn it all into housing, where are the people going to work?
Right.
And you do have an increase in crime when people are out of work. That is just the truth of the matter. So if you don't have a good balance in your community between good paying jobs and a good mix of housing at all different housing price points, you're going to have something out of balance. And so you can't just infuse a whole community with a bunch of housing without realizing and understanding where are those people going to work.
Right.
And then the city, when they have this infusion of this increased housing, do they have the resources that they can increase their infrastructure of manpower for public safety to serve the needs of all the extra people that come into that housing? So you need to have a good commercial base to your community. You can't do what the North End study recommendations are presenting, is basically decimate a premier commercial retail area that is guided that way and change it and say we're no longer going to have it be primarily commercial, we're just going to convert it all into housing.
Right.
That just is not very, that's just not very well thought out.
And then I wanted to point out, every time I hear Maplewood talk about why they have to go with this study they talked about, they make the issue that, well, we can't get businesses to come in here. Well, I was going to try to make the point that I've been naming businesses during these shows many times, and I had another one was in the paper this week again. It's Buck Naked is looking at, actually they're going to do a reduced design for the Mall of America, but it's one, they're going into the Mall of America because it's so expensive there, they want to have a smaller complement in there. But anytime you see a new business, this is something that maybe we should be talking about. I seem to have talked about a business that went into Rosedale, which was a major retailer that was out of Iowa that built a whole new building for their marketing of their products.
Right, but there again, Mr. Bradley, it all depends on the demographics.
Right.
And if you don't have the proper demographics around the Maplewood Mall, somebody like Von Maur is not going to come into the Maplewood Mall because they don't have the population with the right discretionary income living around where they're located.
And that's
again where it goes back to that chicken and the egg.
Right.
Is that if you don't have good paying jobs, then your residents of your community are less likely to have the discretionary income to spend on that extra stuff.
And that's why you don't want to be constructing any more low-income housing in this area at this present time.
Right. It's very important to have a good mix.
Right.
Now, the other day I had a conversation with a gentleman who works for a technology company in Minneapolis. Now, they have offices in downtown Minneapolis. That's expensive. Parking is not free. And there may be a time when they decide that they want to find a new office space somewhere else. And they were joking about, well, one of their employees works more on the St. Paul side. Maybe they'd move to St. Paul. I said jokingly, well, why not move to Maplewood? And they said, well, but that's where 3M is, right? And I said, yes, it is. And they go, well, that wouldn't be half bad to be not too far from 3M. And it got me thinking about, this is a conversation that our city council has never had, at least at none of the public meetings that we've listened to think about how can they encourage the business climate in Maplewood by promoting the fact that we are the home of 3M.
Right.
And the synergies that could be had between technology companies and 3M, or medical device companies and 3M. You know, there's a lot of different overlap that could be had between those types of companies, and there are a lot of different smaller companies that if they had office space not too far from 3M, that would be a wonderful location. And Maplewood could identify those areas in and around 3M and say, as you have indicated in many shows in the past, that we could have office parks. Now, the whole plan with the Maplewood Mall area doesn't include any office parks, none.
Right.
They have one little building block on their whole entire site plan that is indicated for office. That's it. That's the extent of it. No office parks at all. How are we expected to encourage and facilitate the growth of professionals having their offices in Maplewood, of technology companies being located in Maplewood, of device companies, medical device companies, startups being in Maplewood, if we have no accommodations for them, because they're not going to build their own building.
And
they're just not going to.
And we have had a proposal out for the last couple of years. In fact, if you watched the show this year, we have talked about many times that obviously it's a trial balloon I've been throwing out a lot, but it's something I think is logical enough. We got 2 hospitals by Health East. One's in Oakdale and the other one happens to be in Maplewood. And I've said that we should be talking to Mayo and see if maybe Mayo would like to take the Maplewood off and put 3M on it, and they have the synergy of a major corporation that does medical products that would probably want to have a service facility within this area of their own city.
Of course, for that big plan, Mr. Bradley, you'd have to have St. John saying that they are agreeable to all of that, because that's quite a big plan.
But it's the idea that if nobody even puts it out there, and that's why I'm saying the city should be looking at, because of it would then bring a difference in mentality for bringing other businesses here, like you pointed out yourself. If you could say that the Mayo's here and 3M's here, wouldn't that bring other medical product companies into Maplewood, or in the general area at least? And it would justify the fact that this is a good place to live, which means housing prices may go up. But the most important thing is that the housing prices, it's that people want to live here again. And the reality is, it's not a bad little city. It's just that we have been looking so down at our feet for so long that we don't look up.
Yes, that's right. Well, your idea that, the possibilities of a partnership between St. John's and maybe Mayo Clinic, having some shoot of their clinic or their practice here in Maplewood together with 3M. I mean that sounds like that would be a very good plan. But again, like you said, you have to have people who are in leadership positions who have that grander vision, where they can actually, when they're at the right meetings and at the right parties with the right people, that they can say, well, what about, and get the right people who can make those decisions to consider them.
I remember that they used to say that there was a guy who used to have a printing press back during the Revolutionary War, and that everybody said he was crazy as a loon. He used to go out into the rainstorms and fly a kite. And that guy was Benjamin Franklin. And being crazy isn't so bad if you're as crazy as a coot. And this coot, Benjamin Franklin, did a lot for our country, and I think that we could do a lot if we had a little imagination.
Right. Well, on to our next topic. This is a report that we're continuing on. We started it about a month and a half ago, and that's with regard to the Ponds Golf Course that is owned by Ramsey County. It's located in Maplewood, in the south leg of Maplewood. And so for many people who live in the north half of Maplewood, you may have never been to the ponds. But for those people who live in the south leg of Maplewood, this is a big deal, because the Ramsey County Board at one of their meetings heard from the county manager that the ponds was on the budget to be closed so that the property might be used for, housing.
And not any type of housing, subsidized housing.
So not only are people losing their golf course and their green space, but they're going to end up with high-density housing. Well, of course, that created a big ruckus, and people started calling the city council, and the city council then passed the buck as if they didn't know what was going on and said, call your county commissioners. So we played some of those clips a month and a half ago or so. But for those of you that may have missed that report, I think it is important to understand what a couple of the council members on Maplewood's council, what they did say, because next fall is going to be an election year in Maplewood. And that's why this issue is so important to keep tabs on it, because it will be a campaign issue. And next year, next fall, 4 of the 5 seats on Maplewood City Council are going to be up for election. Now you may ask, why is there 4 seats going to be up for election? Well, that's because 3 of the 5 people currently on the council are appointed. And that's when the end of their term occurs, because they can only be there for 2 years. And then Brian Smith, he's up for re-election because a couple years ago he voted with the rest of the council at that time to give himself an extra year. So you see, he's actually in his 5th year as being a city council person for a job that's supposed to only be 4 years in length. So that's why we have an election coming up next fall, and why we didn't have it this fall.
Let me get that straight. 4 of the 5 people making all the decisions for Maplewood are appointed?
No, 3 are appointed, but 4 are up for election next fall.
Oh, that's right. 1 was extended,
Yes.
which means that none of them really should have been there in the first place at this point. That's what it's trying to make the point on.
Right. So in essence, well, yeah, I guess so. That's right. I guess you can't say it any better than that. Well, let's take a look at our first clip, which is one that we showed a month and a half ago. This is Kathy Juniman, who's been on the council for, I don't know, 16 years or whatever. And this is what she has to say about the ponds.
Councilmember Juniman.
I just wanted to report back. I don't know if any of the rest of you have had any phone calls, but I've had 2 from residents in the south about the ponds. So obviously, one in particular was not happy with, well, why was this such a surprise? I'm like, contact your county commissioner. Anyway, so I think Brian's idea that we needed to do this publicly, since they don't know how, was a good one.
It's ironic that Councilmember Juniman is making snide comments about the county commissioners, when County Commissioner Vicki Reinhardt is like one of her best buddies. Okay, so even her best buddy, when it suits her, she'll make a snide comment about. Makes you wonder if you really ever want to be friends with Councilmember Kathy Juniman. You really can't count on her loyalty at all. Now, the other question the other statement she made in there, which is ironic, is that since the county doesn't know how to make things transparent, well, the City Council of Maplewood, they're going to do it talk about this in public and make it transparent. Except that the Maplewood City Council isn't any better at being transparent than the Ramsey County Board is at being transparent. Maplewood, of course, as I indicated before, they've eliminated public comment. They don't allow residents to speak at the meeting before votes are taken, unless, of course, they're required under law and it's a public hearing and they have to. But other than that, the only way you really have of knowing what's going on is reading between the lines. And now I've heard Mr. Bradley, in line with this transparency that Maplewood has. You know, when I was mayor, it was our initiative to make sure that all of the commissions and boards and task force meetings and special or committee meetings and anything like that that was conducted, business was conducted, that those meetings were cable cast so that the public in Maplewood could watch what was going on and know and understand what was going on. Everything was cable cast, everything. Maplewood has slowly been making a change backwards. The newly created Police Advisory Committee, which is now going to get a new name, I don't know exactly what it is, but they meet at the fire station now outside of the range of the camera, so that the residents of Maplewood have no idea what's going on in that commission unless you show up or unless our cameras are there.
Right.
And now the word is that Maplewood doesn't have enough money to cablecast the meetings of the Maplewood Historic Preservation Commission either,
And it's only once every 3 months.
or once every month, depending upon the work that they've got.
Right.
So you see, what other commission is going to be canceled next from being cablecast? That just means that it puts more onto us as volunteers to go to those meetings to get the film footage to show our viewers. So certainly I would say that if there's any viewers out there who would like to get behind a camera and help us film these meetings that Maplewood is taking offline, we certainly could use your help.
We also could use it of anybody who's in Ramsey County right now, because remember, this is a Ramsey County commissioner, and if she's talking about stuff that affects anybody as a taxpayer of the whole area of Ramsey County, that's
Right.
St. Paul, Vadnais Heights, White Bear Lake, the same areas that we're talking about for the rapid transit and all these other things.
Absolutely, Mr. Bradley. That's a good observation, and I do want to mention that Ramsey County, they also have many public meetings that they do not cablecast because they have all these different subcommittees of their county board that meet at a time different than the county board meeting, which is once a week. And so while Ramsey County does cablecast their Ramsey County board meetings, they don't necessarily cablecast any of the other meetings that they have, which are open to the public. And from time to time, we do go to those meetings and get the film footage. But again, we have other jobs as
Right.
well, and we could use other additional volunteers.
And the point I'm trying to make with this here right now, with this ponds situation, as Ms. Juneman said in herself, was that it's Ramsey County's property, it's Ramsey County's issue, it isn't our golf course. So the fact is, it is Ramsey County's property, and if it is that, and we're having a hearing in Maple because of its, the people who are upset aren't Oakdale or aren't White Bear Lake and not in St. Paul or anything like that. It still is part of the property that is owned by them in those other Ramsey County areas.
Right, and it's part of the Ramsey County Parks Plan. So now as we move forward in our next clip, we'll hear what Brian Smith had to say about a month and a half ago.
Thank you, Mayor. As a resident of South Maplewood, I've been getting a lot of these calls and messages and whatnot. There is an organization put together that saw some lawn signs going up this week. So they seem to be very organized. They so if people are wanting to get involved, that might be one good way. You can kind of Google that and look it up. Of sort of a grassroots group that's getting together to advocate for the golf course, and looking forward to the conversation. I appreciate the staff putting that together so quickly.
That's Brian Smith. He's up for re-election next fall. Now, fast forward a couple of weeks from when he said that, they had a council meeting, and Victoria Reinhardt, commissioner on the Ramsey County Board representing Maplewood and White Bear Lake, came before the city council both at the workshop and at the city council meeting under presentations. And so we have film footage of her comments that she made specifically with regard to the ponds and how she just didn't know that this was all going on. And now that it's been brought to her attention, she's taken action. Well, you know, Mr. Bradley, I'm thinking, if I recall, I think she's up for re-election next fall also. So as I said, this is going to be a campaign issue. So be very careful about what you believe these people to tell you, because they're on the campaign trail. You have to recall that when Brian Smith ran for election 4 years ago, that he said that he did not support the Rush Line BLT, the BRT, going up and down the Bruce Vento Trail. That's what he said on the campaign trail. He got elected. Once he was elected and it came to a vote, guess what he voted for? He voted for the alternative route to be the Bruce Vento Trail, so that the Rush Line BRT is going up the Bruce Vento Trail. So if he backed out on his word on that, isn't it possible that he could back out on his word with regard to the ponds?
You know, they talk about the sin of omission, and the one thing I would like you to pay attention to on this, on all these candidates, as they talk about, first of all, the first question I would like to have asked is, why is it failing? Is it not making enough money? Is it not doing its proper thing? Why
you
is
mean
it
the Ponds Golf Course?
The Ponds Golf Course. Otherwise, if it's successful, there's no reason to phase it out. But it's, obviously, there's been a decision by somebody, but you listen to Reinhardt, you don't hear her explain why it's being phased out on her side. Oh, she was the one who actually got the thing built in the first place. But the point is that when I was listening to all the points on it, they said, first of all, it's not an 18-hole, so people don't want to be on it if they're professional type. It's a professional golf course, but it's only 9 holes, so nobody wants to be on it as a non-professional, because those are the in-outs that want to do it for only about an hour or so a day, go for 9 holes and go back to their job. So the fact is, it's not built for anybody. It wasn't at the time, was misconceived, misplanned, and now at the end of it, I'm asking, what is the reason it's being phased out? Mm-hmm. Is it because there's some better plan, there's some production or something that's going in its place, or is it basically it's failed? And if it's failed, isn't that on the doorstep of both our city council and also on the doorstep of our Ramsey County Commissioner's doorstep?
Or maybe it's because they need to raise money.
Oh, maybe that's it too. Oh, but I'll tell you, that'll bring a lot of money the way it is now, because I understand it's closed and it's starting to degenerate down a little bit, even though it's trying to maintain it.
Oh, okay. Well, let's move to clip number 19 and start with Victoria Reinhardt's presentation on the ponds given before the Maplewood City Council meeting in September of 2019.
At the workshop. One is the proposed budget from the county manager proposed closing the Ponds of Battle Creek Golf Course and Driving Range on January 1st, 2021. And I did, whether you support that or not, it really is about a process that did not take place.
So now she acknowledges that they didn't have a process before they decided to put it on the list of things to cut out. Well, it's very customary that the county commissioners do have their conversations at their meetings, and many of these meetings that they have their conversations at with their county manager, by the way, are in these meetings that are not filmed or cable cast. Now, these meetings generally are audio recorded, but how many people are looking for an audio recording that they can just hear what people said? And it's my understanding that in order to get that audio recording, you actually have to ask for it. That it's not just on their website so you can download an MP4 and listen to it in your iPhone. So here you've got County Commissioner Vicki Reinhardt saying that, okay, well, we didn't have a process and it just was on the list. The county manager decided that it should be on the list of things to cut.
And when I look at some of the other big decisions that we made, such as the Vadnais Dome and other things of that nature, we had workshops. The county board had workshops. We had community meetings. We had community outreach in other ways as well. And then we made a decision to move forward and partnered with the community to make that happen, including some funding that is going to be coming forward with that. And I feel that that process should have happened here. And we have the 21st century Ramsey County Parks System vision, and to pull one golf course out of that discussion did not make sense to me, and I think that we owe it to the constituents, no matter where it is. I mean, if this is the ponds this time, but honestly, we need to make sure that we have the public engagement.
She has been in her position for at least 20 years. And this is only a knee-jerk reaction. It was only after there was the public outcry that she feels and believes, oh my goodness, we should have had some kind of outreach process, some type of engagement, because she didn't bring that up at the county board meeting where the county board and the county manager discussed this budget item. She didn't bring up her objection then. She didn't vote nay. She didn't ask to have the item tabled. She didn't ask for more information. It's my understanding that none of that happened at all. And it's only as a result of public outcry that she's changed her tune. Let's continue.
Read into the record for the city council the letter that I sent out, and I appreciate it, and I'll let you talk about the action that or what you are planning to do after that. But this is to the Ramsey County manager, and it was copied to the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners. It was from September 18th. To achieve our vision for a Ramsey County 21st century park system, the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners will need to make important decisions on park system changes that will best serve all Ramsey County residents equitably.
So now she's reading into the record her letter that she wrote to the board that she serves on and to the county manager. Now, of course, she is working with them every single day down there in the Ramsey County offices, which are in St. Paul City Hall. And so it isn't like they only meet once a week or twice a month like the Maplewood City Council does. They actually report to work Monday through Friday in the same offices, working together with each other, talking in the hallway, talking in their rooms, even though there's probably all kinds of open meeting violations. Nobody is ever down there to check on them to see who's talking to who, when, and whether or not the meetings are posted properly at all. There is actually very little in the way of accountability for the Ramsey County Board. And here she's trying to pretend like that she is set aside from all of them and that she's written them this letter that she's reading into the record to establish her position on all of this as the defender of the people who want to save the ponds.
You know, the thing that bothers me about the whole deal, she's supposed to read any type of communications comes in, any type of changes. And I remember that when I asked you when you were a mayor about changes that were coming in, you would be given some type of information if something was to happen that changed in your city. My question here is, if she was aware of this and that they were going to go ahead with a plan for it, and it had to be written somewhere, why isn't that she addressing the fact that she was at least aware of it at some point? When was she aware of this, that it was going to be shut down, and nobody told her about it? She is totally ignorant of any type of knowledge until this meeting, and now she's upset and irate. But yet, at the point that they had to say it in some venue, if nothing else, the person who was in charge of all the golf courses would have had to say it to some commissioner or some commissioner's assistant who's supposed to bring it up to her. And if she doesn't listen, if she doesn't read, because it's got to be on documentation, What does she do all day other than go out and have coffee with other commissioners and does nothing? That's a lady that really should lose her job at this point. She's justified the reason to be fired.
Good comments, Mr. Bradley. Now let's take a look at our next clip.
Addenda are to, the first one, the addendum one is to remove the closure of the Ponds of Battle Creek Driving Range and Golf Course from the 2021 budget. And the second addendum is to prepare and implement a plan for board workshops and engaging the community to learn about their needs and wants from the 21st century Ramsey County Park System. Data from staff and community input will help inform the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners as we make important decisions regarding changes to facilities and programming.
Just putting more stuff into the record to try to cover her bases, that she can verify to the voters that she is supporting the non-closure of the ponds, whereas in essence, she never objected when it actually was before the commission to start with. Let's continue.
Is to remove the closure date of January 1, 2021 for the golf course from the budget. The budget impacts as contained in the 2021 proposed budget would be zero in 2020 and a revenue increase of an estimated $5,000 in 2021. The staffing impact for 2021 could delay reallocation of staff to other park system efforts by up to 1 year, and therefore there is no budget impact in 2021 for taking that out of the budget or keeping it open. That's what it comes down to.
Since the ponds is part of the Ramsey County Park System and the park's budget, certainly it does appear that there should be a holistic look at the entire Ramsey County Park System
Right.
and budget. And certainly if that's what she's calling for, that's a great thing. But she should have called for this months ago when the Ramsey County manager was talking about the budget, the budgeting process, and we actually have had clips on these news programs of the Ramsey County manager giving his budget presentation to the Ramsey County Board. And she did not bring this up. I don't know why not, but certainly as a commissioner of over 20 years, she should have known about this issue, she should have raised the issues, and she should have done it then, rather than wait for the public to cry foul. Now, Mr. Bradley, we're at the end of our news program. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And viewers, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back again next week with more news. We still have some film footage, additional information on the ponds that you'll want to tune into. Plus, we'll have information on the gun range in South Maplewood. See you then. Bye-bye.